Hey Gearheads, and welcome to GT Garage Talk, a discussion about all things automotive. I am your host, Corey, and as promised last week, this week we are still talking about the Detroit Auto Show, this time with some first-hand knowledge, first-hand experience from the show floor, from the Mustang Stampede that happened afterwards, which was the public unveiling or the unveiling of the 7th gen Ford Mustang that is not a hybrid, is not all-wheel drive, does come with a 5-liter V8, and should be a lot of fun. This week's guest is a recurring one here on the channel. It is Jimmy Dinsmore. He writes for theweekenddrive.com. He also is a Mustang historian, a published Mustang historian, and you can find a link to his book through Amazon on our website, gtgaragetalk/gear, and he has a new book coming out. We will touch on that just a little bit within this episode, but very excited to pick his brain, to get his insight on the auto show scene, what it looks like from his 14 years in the industry and going to auto shows, what his thoughts of the future of the industry are like, and really just get to pick his brain about the new Mustang after seeing it in person, in the flesh, and knowing what he knows about just the history inside and out of the nameplate, because again, published Mustang historian with so much knowledge that as a Camaro guy, I cannot even compare. So without further ado, here is Jimmy Dinsmore. Great to have you back. A lot for us to talk about today.
There sure is, Corey. I mean, you would think, it's kind of a dead time for the auto industry with the model years transitioning out, new ones coming in. But, last week was a very crazy, busy week for the industry.
Yes, and I am very jealous is a very negative word, but I envy it. No, I'm just, congrats to you on getting to go to the Detroit Auto Show. I've alluded, especially on last week's episode, we had some air conditioning issues here that precluded me from making the trip up north. But what was your experience at the first Detroit Auto Show in a few years?
Well, so first, don't be too jealous. You actually didn't miss too much, Corey, except for, we're going to talk about it a little bit later. The Mustang Stampede was extremely cool. But the North American International Auto Show, NAIAS, I've been going to for 14 years. It's only a 3.5-hour drive from me. So it's a drive to, it's easy to get to. I was definitely thrilled to get back and just getting back in the action post-pandemic. It was, that was good. But, it lacked luster, man. It was tough. First of all, I was unaware that President Biden was making an appearance at the show the day of media preview day. So I get there and there's heavy security and bomb sniffing dogs. And I'm like, what is going on? And finally, one of the journalists in front of me is like, you're aware the president's coming today. I said, well, now this all makes sense. Yeah. So after getting through a long line, metal detectors, the whole 9 yards, I get to the show floor to find out, well, you have an hour and a half, and then everybody's got to clear out of the convention center because the president's going to get a private tour, and they were throwing all of us in the media out. So I literally only had an hour and a half on the show floor. As someone who's not a video YouTuber, unlike yourself, it wasn't that big of a deal, but all my YouTube journalist friends out there were not at all happy with the limited time and limited access they had to the vehicles. So I just had to kind of double time that which I wanted to see. And thankfully, I think I got it all in that short amount of time because, let's see, Ford, GM, Stellantis, and Toyota. Those were the only, and tiny little Subaru. Those were the only automakers there. That means no Honda, no Koreans, no Europeans. So it was an NAIAS, unlike one I've not seen before. It was definitely toned down, felt very like a regional type of car show instead of the North American International Auto Show. So I was a little disappointed. And there weren't any real reveals. GM had they showcased some souped up. Uh, I think it was a souped up Tahoe
Just
with
barely, too.
yeah,
Like 13 horsepower, but
yeah. So that was their big reveal, and then Toyota didn't. If they had a reveal, I didn't catch what it was, and Stellantis had done their reveal the night prior. That was the final hurrah of the 300, which I think has, I don't know, 500 horses or something on it. And then other than that, there weren't any reveals during the auto show. Of course, as we're going to talk about soon, the Ford Stampede took place later that night, off just about a mile away from the convention center. And of course, the seventh generation Ford Mustang was revealed there. So that was by far the star of the week for me.
So that is very interesting. So being in Motor City, it's no surprise that the big players there were those who called Detroit home, even though everybody's been working from home and work life looks completely different than it did before. I've got it on good authority that barely anybody even works at the Renaissance Center for General Motors anymore. They're all remote working. It's basically a glorified showpiece for the brand, but very interesting that that really was the only showing at the show. I've been to Chicago twice now, and I've been to LA once and haven't made it to New York or Detroit yet. But growing up, and I touched a lot on this last week on my solo episode, I looked forward to car show season, even just as a fan of the industry through Car and Driver and Motor Trend, just covering the product launches and how the brands tried to one up each other with the reveals and the press conferences and the set pieces and the pomp
Mm-hmm.
and circumstance. And since COVID, it seems like brands have adjusted. Now they're doing their own solo standalone events where they can control all the aspects of it. They have more control over who's there, over where it's at, things like that. Even Stellantis, you mentioned they showed off the 300, but in the weeks leading up to it, they revealed the electric charger at a standalone event. Granted, it was there at Detroit. That's the first time the public could see it. But
Mm-hmm.
it, do you see this as the new norm? Brands doing their own things and usurping auto shows, or are they going to get back on board as auto shows become a thing again?
I think that I don't think we're ever going to go back to the pomp and circumstance and grandeur of auto shows as we once knew and loved them. I think what you alluded to is correct, that there's going to be more private events, like you said, where they can control the messaging, they can control all the aspects that they want to control. And as a journalist, I think that's okay. The only issue is that you have a limited amount of people that get invited to those things, and it's usually the same fly people, is what I always call them. It's always the people on the circuit who always get to go, and then maybe people like you or me who might be, I don't know, not on all those lists. We don't get our first shot at the content. By the time we do, we got to come up with our own little angle to make the content original and to offer our audiences the, well, why do I care factor.
Right.
So I hope it doesn't go that way, but I'm fearful that it is going to go that way,
So
especially from what I saw in Detroit. I mean, that was, I don't know, man. I don't know. And they wouldn't even, a couple of my good friends that I saw there were really worked up and not happy. There were a lot of vehicles we couldn't even get into, as in they were locked and they weren't letting us in. And it's like, we're not, we're not the public, not to sound like
right.
some kind of a snob or anything, but I mean, this is the media preview day, and we need inside to shoot photos and video and to see what we can see. And in many instances, these vehicles, they wouldn't let us in. And I'm sorry, shame on any of the OEMs that had that policy, and hopefully forever and always they change that policy when it comes to media previews.
Yeah, it is a very strange situation we find ourselves in. I was following along with some of the conversation in the industry as it was happening. I found out probably around the same time as you that the president was going to be there. I found out about the locked door policy and just all the things going on. And sitting here, like literally where I am sitting now, working without air conditioning, waiting for the text to show up and stuff. And in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, well, maybe this wasn't the worst thing that I didn't spend the money to go up there. It sounds like it would have been really hard for me to get the content to pay for the trip itself. But what was interesting to me is even though we've had these standalone events, automakers are still leaning in a little bit, and it was the first public showing of the Blazer EV. It was the first public showing of the Equinox EV. It was the first public showing of the Charger EV, and I know I'm saying a lot of EV stuff. There were a few like they had to do it at Detroit, the 30th anniversary of the Jeep Grand Cherokee, because it made its debut at Detroit, busting through a pane of glass. So
Right.
there were some special showings there, but yeah, without basically any Europe or Asian representation, very interesting show all told that in a silo of itself could have me concerned. But I did reference, I went to LA last year and I felt like that showed we were on the way back because there was a little bit more pomp and circumstance there. There weren't like grand showpieces or anything, but Hyundai Kia came to play. They both had concepts that they showed off. Essentially the same vehicle on with two different stylings. Fisker was somebody I didn't expect to have the showing and the crowd, but he drew quite a crowd, Henrik Fisker. And then VinFast, which seems like everybody is talking about this Vietnamese startup company that is going all electric and making a splash in the industry. Those were the big players at LA, which again has me looking forward to this November and 2022 LA Auto Show, hoping that maybe we're going down the right path. I know last year, again, you said Honda wasn't at Detroit, they weren't at LA. Mercedes, BMW, there were a lot of missing players even there at LA, but it felt like we were trying to get there. I don't know. It's so interesting.
I mean, again, I hope so because I really do enjoy the auto shows, not just for the camaraderie, but like the content and the inside information that we get. And mind you, I'm not with my audiences. I'm not sitting there for the press conferences. Actually, that's not what I do. I'm more like the big picture. What are the things you're seeing that are trends that you can spot? I did still see some of that. So you had alluded to EV. Well, there were obviously some EVs there, but make no mistake, the ICE vehicles were still
Mm-hmm.
prominently out front. I mean, on one turnstile you would have had, you know, a gasoline powered vehicle, and on the other one maybe would either be the plug-in hybrid electric version of that vehicle or the EV version. Every concept vehicle I saw there, which a lot of times I love, the concepts are what catch my eye the most.
Mm-hmm.
um, some of them were crazy designs, and some were like real flashy. And I'm like, wow, I hope they make that vehicle. But each one of those concept vehicles were in fact EVs. So that definitely shows you where things are going, whether people want to hear that or not. And I know I keep alluding to us talking about the Mustang, but the good news is that the next gen, the seventh gen Mustang, is remaining an ICE vehicle. So that should resonate very happily with the enthusiasts out there.
So let's talk about that a little bit. We'll ease into it because they took shots. I watched the reveal online. They took shots at Chevy and Mopar by talking about how they are still invested in the nameplate and in V8 muscle, and how some automakers are kind of letting that fall away. I mean, 2022 should have been an anniversary year for the Camaro. Not a peep was made of it. No decal package, no nothing on the Camaro. Highly rumored to be perhaps 2023 its last year, because the platform on which it rides with the Cadillac twins, siblings, is confirmed going away. And then you've got Mopar doing their swan song of their Mercedes inherited platforms, the Challenger and the Charger and the 300. And they've already shown off their EV concept. But everyone that covered the new 7th gen Mustang has also alluded that this is kind of the ICE Mustang's swan song, even though Ford is reluctant to say it. What was your feeling in that arena as they were presenting it? Do you feel like this is the last hurrah for V8 Mustangs? I know all the rumors leading up to the reveal would be like an all-wheel drive version or a plug-in hybrid version, but what was the feeling like there at the Stampede?
So prior to even getting there, I had already been given the embargoed information, which, as you know, sometimes we're given information, but we have to keep it under lock and key and can't leak it out. No more than 4 hours before that event, somebody on the internet, it was not me, somebody on the internet leaked out all the specs on it. But as I was looking this over, I said, "Wow, look the looks of it, the powertrain. There is no hybrid. There is no all-wheel drive. This is a muscle car. This is what the enthusiasts want a Mustang to be. There is a V8. There is the EcoBoost, and there's nothing else." And it's like, wow, that was my initial response. It was like, oh man, the enthusiasts are going to be so happy. And then during the reveal, absolutely Ford took kind of a, not even a veiled shot at their competition. Good for them to kind of like not stick the middle finger up at it, but like,
Poke the bear a little.
the very first pony car, I called it the first muscle car. I realized technically the Mustang wasn't a muscle car when it started, but let's assume the Mustang is a muscle car, and it was the first one of its kind. So I'll say the first muscle car is going to end up being the very last muscle car standing. And as a Mustang enthusiast and someone who has his finger on the pulse of the Mustang enthusiast community, that's the way it should be, to be honest. With all due respect to Camaro and the Mopar Charger and Challenger, who by the way have really pushed Ford along. I mean, it was looking as if they were going to knock Ford off the crown of best selling vehicle of its kind, and I don't think that's end up going to happen. But the fact that the Mustang still, the 2024 7th generation Mustang is going to be, a V8 and completely ICE, I think that speaks volumes. And you asked do I think this is going to be the swan song? I fear it is. I do. I really think it is. But I want to give credit to Jim Farley. He has done an amazing job of like caring about that brand, especially and the heritage of that vehicle. During what was said at the Stampede and the reveal, they played up all the heritage, and if you look at the design, I mean, it really holds true to the heritage of what that vehicle has and always will be.
Right.
So he kind of walked back that Ford was going the GM route and going completely EV. So never say never is what I'm going to say as far as will the 7th gen be the last ICE Mustang? You never know.
Maybe the last ICE only, because again, you
Yes,
alluded.
for sure. I will say it's going to be the last ICE only, because let's be honest, I was one of the few people who was actually looking forward to what an electric Mustang could do, because, if people have never driven an EV, like the torque on those things blows away almost everything off the line. And, is it gimmicky that Dodge was piping in like loud exhaust tunes onto their Charger? Yeah, that was weak. Um, and nothing beats the visceral sound of the Mustang GT 500. I mean, nothing will ever sound better, in my opinion, than what that sounds like. And you can artificially tune something and make it sound like that, but you know that it's things like that that really excite the enthusiasts out there. So the fact that as of now, there's no EV Mustang unless you count the Mustang Mach-E.
Yeah, the writing is there on the wall. I think Ford, in introducing the Mustang Mach-E, which I affectionately or not so much refer to as solely the Mach-E, which is the way I feel they should have gone with it. Play up its Mustang roots a little bit, but leave Mustang out of it. And they are giving themselves an out, but it is not like, oh, this is the future of Mustang. So, very interesting to see how that nameplate plays out over the next 10, 15 years because in I am a huge fan of competition. I'm a Jeep Wrangler guy through and through, but I love that the Bronco exists. And I love that they took a slightly different approach and that people are comparing them. And there's a lot of tension and back and forth. I love that about Mustang and Camaro. And during Camaro's hiatus, I don't want to say Mustang got complacent, but those weren't the best Mustangs Ford has ever made either because they really, I guess they were taking shots at Corvette during that time and it allowed them to elevate their game a little bit more. But I feel like Mustang without Camaro, Mustang without any competition, it's it's not the same, right?
No, I agree. And I mean, in my book, Mustang by Design, I had interviewed the designer of the original Ford Mustang, Gail Halderman, and then the product planner for the original Mustang, Hal Sperlich. And I even asked, well, tell me about the rivalry with GM. And I mean, in no uncertain terms, they said we had spies there. We knew what they were doing, and they were going to be damned if they were going to get one up at any time. So anything you could do, I could do better. And I'm 100% with you that competition is great for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't, if they get complacent, then for sure this is going to be the swan song for the Mustang. Like, don't let your foot off the accelerator. Keep going, keep that tradition and the heritage going. And just because there isn't going to be a Camaro, and let's be honest, the Camaro's done. It's toast. Um, and there isn't going to be an ICE Charger or Challenger, probably. You know, don't let that, make it where you water down the Mustang further. Like
Right.
that's my stance on it. So I agree. Competition is necessary and a good thing.
So, with all the specs out in the open now, what are some of your favorite things about the 7th gen Mustang? Is it the style? Is it Von Gittin Jr.'s input with the drift mode? What really stood out to you?
I mean, I know some people love the drift mode thing, but for me, like drifting is, I mean, what average person's drifting a vehicle? I mean, you're gonna wreck that thing if you do it. So that didn't interest me in the least. I mean, I'm glad for the niche people that it is exciting to that it's a feature that's there. But for me, it was the styling. I loved seeing the tri-bar headlights like
Mm-hmm.
that I was like, yes. Like I think I was on Facebook Live while it was going, and you could hear me like say yes when I saw
Mm-hmm.
that go off. Because again, my good friend, the late Gail Harderman, I mean, he was the one that came up with the three headlights and the three taillights. Like, I mean, that was like one of his things that he loved and embraced. And it's been there for almost every
Right.
Mustang through the years. I mean, some of the Fox bodies lost that. But it's one of the telltale signs, that's a Mustang. And the the grill, I like that there's two grills. There's a grill for the GT version,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a separate grill for the EcoBoost version. So it kind of gives you whatever you want. Like, hey, I want it to look like this, fine, then get the Eco. And if you want it to look like that, it is mouthier on the GT. I know a lot of people thought it was just a little too mouthy. For the GT, I actually thought it was really sharp and sexy. The thing that that just made my jaw drop was that back end where it's kind of bulging out
Mm-hmm.
a little bit. The back end, I was like, wait a minute, who do you think you are here? Like, we haven't seen a Mustang with that kind of back, to my knowledge, ever. And man, did it just add a nice little dimension to the styling of that thing. Like, to me, that's the best looking rear end ever of a Mustang.
So I had to say it. Everybody online is saying, especially that styling aspect is very reminiscent of Camaro. Everybody's saying Ford ripped off Camaro. You've already alluded to me. You've seen it in person. You don't feel that way.
I didn't see Camaro. I mean, I see why people say that, especially the slope of the A pillar. And
Mm.
for people who aren't aware, the A pillar is like the first column that's attached to the front windshield. So the slope of the A pillar is a little bit Camaro like. Um, but that back end looking like a Camaro, I'm sorry, I just don't see it. I mean, they're all muscle cars, so
Mhm.
there's going to be a standard look.
Mhm.
And let's be honest, if they went crazy and made it look something like, I don't know, like, oh, it's too Corvette looking, or it looks
Mhm.
too much like a GT. I mean, there's always going to be the naysayers out there. And I have had it out with a lot of the enthusiasts over those comments because I'm like, come on, Ford did exactly what you wanted. They didn't drop an EV in there. They didn't drop a hybrid in there. They didn't drop all-wheel drive in there. And they played up a lot of the heritage looks of the Mustang. Like, I mean, I don't know. Some people are just never going to please. And to those people who think it looks like the Camaro, I'm sorry. I just don't. I don't see it. I don't agree. And even if it is a tiny bit, I mean, imitation is a form of flattery. And we already know that, you know, they're looking at what each other's doing. And I mean, I don't know. I didn't see it, man. I just didn't.
I always laugh because I feel, especially now posting news and images myself of the latest and greatest in the industry, there are always those comments. No matter if it's a crossover, no matter if it's a compact car, no matter the vehicle, everybody has an opinion of what it looks like. Some are right, some are clearly wrong, and people just gotta flap their gums. But I do personally see a little bit of Camaro in there, but this is coming from a Camaro fan,
Yeah.
and knowing that my love of Camaro started when I was 9 years old. In those first few years, I was still figuring stuff out and learning. There were times where if I saw the profile of a Camaro or a Mustang from the 60s, I'm like, wait, which one is that? I obviously know now. I could tell you the difference between a 67 Camaro and a 68 Camaro and a 69 Camaro because they all have something slightly different about them. But 9 year old, 10-year old me who was getting into it had trouble even distinguishing it against a Mustang. So everybody's got opinions. There's a joke in there. I'll leave
Sure.
it.
Well,
But
don't forget, in the '60s, Ford hired away Bunky Knudsen from GM, and he brought with him Larry Shinoda,
Mhm.
both of which had, you know, GM roots and everything that they designed. I mean, Shinoda was the guy behind the Boss
Mhm.
Mustang. Well, a lot of that was, you could see the GM styling on that. I mean, how is that? I don't know. That's a legendary car.
Right.
So I don't. If you think about it, designing a car is really hard to make it look too different. Um, Again, I hark back to what Gail Halderman told me once, and he said designing vehicles is really hard. It's just four corners is all you're
Right.
basically modifying. I mean, so much of it has to be standardized that you really don't have a lot of areas you can go crazy with. And so, I don't know. Give me a break on I don't know. I love the seventh gen, so give me a break on comparing it
Yeah.
to the Camaro.
Well, I find it very interesting. I've had many conversations with very close friends. We'll take pickup trucks, for example. Very close friend and I have gone back and forth about how quote unquote, this isn't me, this is him, all trucks look the same. And then when you get something like the Tundra that very much does not look like anything else on the market, everybody balks at how ugly it is or how different it is or how weird
Right?
it is. And I'm like, okay, so on one hand, they all look the same, but when a brand does something different and uses what liberties they have in the design studio, then you balk at that. It's like, okay, do you really not understand the concept of have your cake and eat it too? Like, what's going on?
And it's funny because I mean Gale, who was briefly over the Ford Truck Studio during his career at Ford, he said trucks were the hardest thing because it's four corners and a rectangle
Right.
basically. Like you really can't do anything with that. So like you said, so Toyota goes a little crazy and makes that Fu Manchu looking front end, and then people are like you said, they lose their mind. And again, I'm like, if they had gone too bland, you would have said, "Oh, it's too bland. It's too conservative." It's like, yeah, designing vehicles is really difficult.
Yep.
Really difficult.
Yep. And everybody wants to put their own stamp on it, their flair, their thoughts, their personality. So yeah, I
I mean, what
don't.
they want Cybertruck? I mean, look what happens when you don't stick to the standardized look.
Yeah.
Then you get that goofy looking thing. And I mean, sure, some people like it, but I mean, come on, that thing looks absurd. So
Yes. Yes. It looks like something that RoboCop would drive.
yeah,
Absolutely.
or that you let your child have like a crayon and they drew something weird and
Yep.
I don't know. Like that's what people get when you complain too much. Like, well, it looks too much the same or blah blah blah. It's like, well, then how about that then?
Yeah. It's like, all right, here you go. This is what you get. Yeah,
That
yeah. So you've mentioned a lot about the heritage and tying in some design cues of previous Mustangs. What are your thoughts on the homages paid to the Fox body? And most notably in the gauge cluster, you can recreate the gauge cluster of the Fox body.
I think it's smart because amongst the Mustang enthusiasts, the Fox body crowd are the most passionate and they're the most common ones you see at car shows. I mean, a lot of the 60s models are hard to come by and the price went crazy on those. And then of course in the 70s you get the Mustang 2, which has a much smaller group of enthusiasts out there. I mean, I'm not dismissing it, but it's there's not a lot of people who love the Mustang 2.
Right.
So then the Fox body was around for so long, had so many different variants that I think it's smart of Ford to tip their hat to that. But my goodness, that internal, like the all glass, they're calling it what I think a cockpit type of
Mm-hmm.
inspiration on that. That thing I did not get to see inside. They wouldn't let us in.
Interesting.
All the doors were locked. We couldn't see it. Like other than I was peeking my head trying to see what I could see. That thing is going to be love hate. I can just tell. It's kind of like the giant uh, 15-inch screens that are on some of the Mach-E's in the F-150. A lot of people are like, "That's too big. It's too dominating." I think from what I saw peeping through the window, that thing is going to be slick. Like that might be the thing I'm most looking forward to
Interesting.
on the 7th gen Mustang. Like I love technology, and as we've talked before, the interior for me is what it's all about anyway. Like what do I have at my fingertips? How's the comfort? What's it sound like in there? So I think this is where Ford's really gonna step forward, and I can't wait to actually get my fingers on that interior touchscreen. So
Very interesting, though. Base models are actually going to have two, everybody's calling them iPads stuck in there. So it's not going to be one curved screen. It's going to be a smaller one for the gauge cluster and a slightly larger one for the infotainment. But both that setup and the curved screen are negating one of those design elements that had been so iconic in the Mustang with that dual cowl hood uh, dashboard. What are your thoughts on that finally bowing out?
I think that's just an evolution.
Mm.
I think that's where cars are being advanced through, is the interior technology like that. And some of the older stuff, it's time for it to go out to pasture, I think. So it doesn't bother me in the least.
I found it interesting that it went away when even the Mach E was able to incorporate it somehow. I'm one of those people that, again, being a Camaro guy, even still, I can't call it a Mustang Mach-E. I just call it the Mach-E. But I truly appreciated what Ford was doing with that vehicle, and the interior absolutely blew me away. That was my first Ford press vehicle. And when I got in it, I said, if this is the future of Ford and Ford products, we are on good standing. Like, this sets the bar in a new way that really was revolutionary from the Ford I knew and grew up with. And I got really excited about it. And then, like I said, being able to tie some Mustang design elements in it, even in subtle ways, I'm surprised that they weren't able, or they just decided not to, with the 7th gen Mustang proper.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure the logic behind it. I mean, I did hear during the Stampede reveal that they mentioned the Blue Cruise is available on the Mustang. I'm like, no one's buying a Mustang and then letting the car drive itself. I mean,
It
you buy
defeats
a
the purpose.
Mustang because it's fun to drive yourself. Like, I'm not dropping Blue Cruise on, even if it comes with my Mustang. Like, I'm just never going to do that. That's never going to be appealing.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially for me. I know we talked last time I interviewed you. Uh, there are reasons you don't buy manual transmission cars, but for me, I'm not going to buy a 5.0 and not get a 6 speed in it. That's just
Yeah, and so
antithetical.
let's give Ford some credit here for keeping the manual. They even said hashtag save the manual. It's still here. It's still available. So I totally get that. I know the enthusiasts are gonna like flock to that. It was a great move by Ford to keep the manual in that 5.0, because so many people agree with you that that's the way it should be. So
Yep. And then after all was said and done, you said you had the embargoed information early. I was sitting at my computer dropping stuff as it trickled out of Ford, and I literally walked out of my office because it was time to put the kiddo to sleep, and then I heard him say, "But wait, there's more," or something to that effect. We have a new, for the first time in years, decades, a new performance moniker variant in the Dark Horse. What are your thoughts, not only on the name, but on what they've told us so far?
well, so I was kind of annoyed that, I mean, good on Ford for keeping that secret. On all my embargo information, I don't know if you had your hands on the embargo stuff too. Dark Horse was nowhere in the embargo information. So I thought we were just getting the EcoBoost and the 5.0, and that was going to be enough for me. Mm-hmm. Then they're like, but wait, there's more. And out comes, what is it, a V8 500 horsepower, Dark Horse. Do I love the name? Oh my God, do I love the name. Do I love the looks? Absolutely do I love the looks. I think this one is going to be, I think it may actually cannibalize a little bit of the GT sales, because I think the people who would just naturally flock to the GT are going to go with the Dark Horse. Now, of course, the big thing is, well, what's the price? We don't know the price. Right. Dark Horse surely is going to cost more than GT, I would assume. But my goodness, good job Ford on A, keeping the secret, and B, having the fastest street legal Mustang ever. Right on. Like, especially with Hellcat going away. Like, this is it.
So
and they fired that thing up. It sounded nasty.
Yeah, so they put some B-roll out, and typically B-roll is just video, no audio, but the B-roll for the Dark Horse was it actually driving through a tunnel. I've always, even in my Camaro love, been a fan of Mustang V8s. They just sound amazing.
Agreed.
And so you better believe as soon as that B-roll dropped, I cut together some footage and put it up online. It is my number one viewed TikTok I don't do much on TikTok, but it is my number one viewed TikTok by like 20-fold
Wow.
and doing quite well on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube as well. But again, everybody had access to that. I was just paying attention enough to get it out there quickly. Has its own unique logo, which slipped, maybe purposefully, maybe not so much, by Ford out like the day of. Everybody's like, "What is this? What is this?" And creating all this buzz around Mustang. What are your thoughts on the look of that Dark Horse badge?
I really like it. Again, I love the name. I'm sad my friend Gail is no longer with us. I would love to have heard what he thought of it. I think knowing him well enough that he would have really, really liked it. He would like the logo. Uh, Now, mind you, designers and many of the people are like they don't care as much as the rest of us, and certainly as much as the enthusiasts about things like names and logos. Like that's less relevant to
Right.
them. I mean, for Pete's sake, the Mustang name didn't get named the Mustang until like the 11th hour
Right.
anyway. Um, I love how that Dark Horse logo looks, and I definitely like the name, and I love that they kind of revamped the Coyote engine for it and made a specific Coyote. Because again, within the Ford enthusiast world, the Coyote engine is beloved. So
Yeah. So going back to our conversation of looking Camaro-esque, the placement and the first glance of that Dark Horse badge reminds me of the Transformers Camaro badge that when I first saw it, I kind of chuckled and then I got past it. So it's just one of those things like, oh, ha. Like I can see memes coming from it, but then I got over it immediately. I was like, it is what it is. What stood out more to me about Dark Horse, they even alluded, they mentioned Carroll Shelby leading up to mentioning the Dark Horse model and name. What do you feel? How do you think this plays into the Shelby aspect of the Mustang? Does it cannibalize future plans of Shelby because they've already teased a GT 500 or something along those lines? Where is it just in addition to? Is it in place of? Like I don't know. As a Texan myself, and Carroll Shelby as was a Texan, that name means a lot to me, even as a Camaro guy.
so I there's first of all there's almost assuredly going to be a Shelby GT 500 version of the 7th gen Mustang. You can take that to the bank. I stake my reputation on it. It's not official, but it's going to happen. So I am also interested to see where Dark Horse will be with that. I think Dark Horse is coming out first. So I almost look at it as, remember when they had the last Mach 1 that just came out,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of churned up a little bit of the heritage of the Mach 1. Sales were pretty light for that Mach 1,
Mm-hmm.
but it had enough of a following to where it made it worth the time. I think the Dark Horse might become a collector vehicle because I don't think it's going to sell a lot. I do think the price is going to be too high, and I think those who are have the income, they may just hold out for the GT 500, the fine, because I could definitely see the final 7th gen Shelby GT 500 Mustang being an instant classic. And I mean, I have already professed my love for the current gen GT 500. I mean, nothing sounds like it, nothing performs like it. I mean, it gets you right where you want every single time you drive. So it seems like the Dark Horse is going to have many of those aspects. So, like you, I'm going to be watching close. I don't know. It might cannibalize it. I don't know.
Yeah, very interesting. Mach 1 is a good kind of barometer for that because it's playing similarly in that space in between GT, in between Shelby. So, yeah, that's a good analogy, good way to look at it. I would expect nothing less from a Mustang historian. What are you up to now as we kind of bring this episode to a close? You just got back from Detroit, covering the show there. Uh, what have you been up to since and during? And
Sure. So I'm still the automotive editor for theweekenddrive.com. All my content pushes through there first, and then I have a syndicated network of other newspapers where it goes out. But as I was telling you before we started this, I'm super excited. I just got my page proofs from my publisher, Cartech Books, for book number 2, which I wrote back to back. So I wrote Mustang by Design 4.5 years ago, and then I wrote this book about the history of the Ford F Series as America's #1 selling truck of all time. I wrote that back to back, and then a pandemic hit, and then the book was dead, wasn't going to happen, and I was annoyed and frustrated. And then all of a sudden, they decide we're going to go forward with it, and I got my page proofs. So it's my understanding that this book comes out late this year or likely early in 2023. It starts in 1948 when the Ford F1 started as a true pickup truck. We allude a little bit to the more rural aspects of the Model T and the history that played in evolving into the truck. But the tone of the book, I'm really proud of it, is as society evolved, so too did the pickup truck alongside of it, from very agricultural and basic to the luxury daily driver that it is now. And thankfully, the slight delay from the pandemic allowed me to come back in and add another chapter. And I got 13th gen F-150, including the Lightning and the Maverick, into the book. So uh, I was really glad. Actually, all things work out for a reason, I suppose. I was able to get all the way from 1948 to 2021 trucks in there.
So this could start an entirely different episode, and we definitely don't have the time for it. But I recently tested, and probably since the last time you and I spoke, tested an F-150 Lightning, and that is one of the vehicles that has caused so much stir in the automotive world. And especially, I don't encourage anyone to go and read the comments on one of my reels showing off the Frunk, the Mega Power Frunk. Uh, it it got brutal. There were personal attacks in there. Like, I, I laugh because it all put money in the bank, and if that's what it takes to make money at this stage in building my channel, then so be it. I can take it because that's how I look at it. But at the same point, like, there is so much misunderstanding about the Lightning that it just makes me wince and shake my head, because everybody's like, yeah, but you can't tow with it. Not everybody tows. Or they're like, it, again,
I need to look at the Lightning for what it's going to mean to a fleet company or a construction, the owner of a construction company. He can buy 5 Lightnings, get the tax write-off for buying an EV, and it's going to handle all the payload. It's going to handle wherever they need to drive from work site to work site. Because like you said, I don't have the stats. I'm sure they're out there somewhere. The majority of people don't use a truck the way you would think they use a truck. I always use the term, you're over trucked. Like, oh, I got me a dually F-250. Oh, really? Do you have like a fifth wheel? Oh, no, I'm just driving from work and home. Like, all right. Well, I mean, if you like it, great. But you don't need a truck. But people think they do. So I have ridden in the Lightning. I have not driven it yet. I've been, in fact, when I was at the Detroit Auto Show, I was begging the PR person who knows me well. I was like, it's time to get me in that so I can drive it. I'm super excited about it because it has its role within the pickup truck world. Yes. Now, like you said, you're not taking it camping. You're not going to drive it on a road trip, pulling your camper. I mean, it's not feasible. It's not realistic. It's impractical. But if you are one of those people that likes to use your truck as a daily driver, and occasionally you drop some mulch or some plywood in the back, then the Lightning might be for you.
Yeah, everybody has gotten so caught up in the political aspect of it that they forget Ford F-150 is the best-selling vehicle
Mhm.
in the US, not truck, vehicle. And they have an F 150 for anyone and everyone. There are different models for different people. Nobody is complaining that the Raptor has decreased towing capabilities over an EcoBoost or one that is built to tow heavy. Yet that is the first place everybody goes with the Lightning. And that's because the Raptor has a very clear mission statement. It is to be cool, fast, fun off road, and people accept that. But for some reason, that is lost on everybody that
And I
has a
throw back
keyboard.
at those same people. So you're going to consider the power boost then, right? You're going to buy the hybrid
Right,
version of the F-150, which has the most towing capability. You're never there's no range anxiety. The best fuel economy you're going to get. So you're considering that one. Oh no, I don't want to consider that one either. Okay, so it's more of a political thing. You
right,
don't like
right, right.
hybrids. You don't like Bs, and that's fine. I'm not getting into any of that. I mean, I'm sure you generate plenty of comments when you step into that type of world. But all I ever tell people is like, don't just poo poo it because of the technology. It has a purpose. And I mean, damn it, like that lightning when I was in it is like stupid fast.
Yes.
Stupid.
Yes. It had me recalibrating everything I knew about pickup trucks and fast vehicles because something that big should not move that quickly. Like it
Right.
does not compute. And so my final thought on the Lightning is it takes the already most popular vehicle in the states and broadens its appeal and opens up an entire market that never would have considered any other F 150 for reasons, and it only makes it that much more competitive. Ford knows what they're doing. They did it for them in the right way. Chevy likes to, and I've spoken to the chief engineer on this, likes to mention how they took a different approach than their competitors with an all new platform. But Ford took essentially the truck, ripped out the ICE components, put in the EV components, and it feels as much an F 150 as anything else until you
Oh,
mash the
for
pedal.
sure. And like you said, this doesn't mean it's the end of your diesel. It doesn't mean it's the end of your V8. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't work that way.
In their minds, it's, and to their credit, I will give a little bit. So much of the messaging from brands lately has been all EV, get on board. It's happening. So I get it that there's some
Yeah, but
apprehension.
General Motors, they definitely have been
Right.
that way, and I think that's a huge mistake by that's all they talk about. But even Farley lately has backed off of all that. It's like, well, we're gonna make what vehicles people want and everything. I'm like, perfect. And then Toyota is the one to always keep your eye on because they're gonna be the last one to like
Mhm.
go all in on something. They're gonna dip their toe in and test the waters and say, okay, let's see what the market says. And so, don't watch the leader in that, which is probably General Motors right now. Watch, someone like Toyota from the back of the pack who's gonna wait and see where the future takes us because that I think it's just that people are so tired of saying like the unrealistic number of 2030 that all vehicles are going to be EVs. Like it, listen to the words I'm saying. Please record this and blast it out. Like they by the year 2030, even 2035, you're going to have gas stations. You're going to have to put gas in your cars. They're
Mhm.
not going to come and take them from your house and take your keys. Like it's not going to go that way. I promise you. Even GM's going to continue to make
Yep.
ICE vehicles after 2030. They just don't have the choice, and our infrastructure is not there yet either. So
Yeah, to your point about Jim Farley kind of backpedaling over at Ford, I believe General Motors has done the same thing. They were previously using all electric phrasing, and now they are using the electrified, which basically gives them the out of hybrids. And I'm perfectly fine with that. Hybrid technology is so amazing currently that yes, I will sign off on that. Give me the best of both worlds and let's move
yeah,
forward.
you see the news yesterday from Mercedes, the C63 Performance that they
Mm-hmm.
released as
Mm-hmm.
a hybrid,
Yep.
I think it's been a
It
four-cylinder
is.
hybrid,
It is.
and it has 700 horsepower or something stupid.
Yeah.
So like people need to realize hybrid, it is not a Prius anymore. Okay,
Right.
like hybrid can mean anything, and if there's any kind of electrification with it, it's going to have stupid fun torque. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, like everyone's got to change the way their preconceived notions on all of this because uh, I, what I really like is all the plug-in hybrid vehicles that are out there now. Like
Yes.
it's a great transition between ICE and EV. Like you get the best of both worlds. Like you want to plug it in at your house overnight and get you about 40, 50 miles of gas-free driving. Beautiful. And then when that range runs out, you still got your gas engine to get you where you need to go. So I think people need to be a little more open-minded, but we're Americans and the American consumer is fickle and very much stubborn and set in their ways too. So
Yeah. Uh, After spending time in the Tundra iForce Max, which is their hybrid powertrain, would not get the non-hybrid. Uh, it was truly that good. It was very powerful. I really, really liked that powertrain. We spent time with the non-hybrid version in the Lexus LX600. Liked it in that. Loved it even better with the hybrid, the Max, which gives 48 extra horsepower and like 130 pound-feet more torque. And yes, 100% would go iForce Max if I'm in the Tundra realm shopping there. And like you said, just what Mercedes was able to do with that little four-cylinder. Yes, we are no longer talking about Prius hypermiling vehicles.
mm-mm.
We're talking about using everything at our disposal to make something fun and exciting and fuel efficient too. I spent time in an Audi A3, which was a hybrid, and that little thing was fun. And I got over 30 mpg in my time with it, and I was driving it as I would drive it. That is
Yeah,
to say, I was not holding back. So there's just a lot of good on the horizon, and
there
yes,
is. And I did see it in a smaller scale when I was at Detroit. I mean, you still saw it there. So
yeah. So, Jimmy, I have to ask you, Detroit was a 3 hour drive for you. Are you planning on heading west in November? Is there an opportunity we will get to meet face to face at LA?
I've never been to the LA Auto Show. It's not currently on my travel plans, so I would say probably not.
All right. All right. Well, one last time, where can people find you and when should they expect your new book?
Sure. So like I said, at theweekenddrive.com, you'll see all my content there. You can also just Google my name, Jimmy Dinsmore. I'm like the first 40 pages of Google when you type in my name. And then if you go on Amazon right now, both Mustang by Design, my book that's available now about the history of the Ford Mustang from a design aspect, and then the history of the Ford F Series is America's #1 selling truck. You can pre-order that now on Amazon. So just type in Jimmy Dinsmore, Dinsmore, on Amazon, and it'll bring you right to my author page. So
And I'll do you one better, listeners. I will put links to both in the show notes, and you can also go to gtgaragetalk/gear, and I will have them on that gear page as well as a featured item from our podcast. Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on and chatting. I hope at some point we are at the same show so I can shake your hand and meet
yes,
you formally in the post, I guess we could say the
I
post
usually
COVID
go to
world.
Chicago in February, which is the last place you want to be in February. Right?
Yes, I took a picture of my wife standing by a pile of snow as tall as she was. So, yes, definitely an interesting time of year in that location. But we shall meet there, if not sooner.
Yes, exactly. Thanks for having me on, Corey. I do appreciate it.
Yes, sir. And with that, I am just so thankful that Jimmy made time for us to give some insight on a show that I was supposed to be at myself, and due to a series of events, had to stay back here in Texas to have my air conditioning fixed and repaired. Doesn't sound like I missed a whole lot unless you are big in the Mustang crowd. I, again, am a Camaro guy through and through. at some point, I will own a second Camaro. I did own a 45th anniversary for a year. That's a story unto itself. Go listen to episode 1 of the podcast. I explain a little bit of my car history there. But very grateful for Jimmy and his insights. Again, he's been going to auto shows for 14 years now. I've been paying attention to them since I was 9. I'm 35 now, about to be 36. So you do the math there. And yes, I am watching, holding my breath, praying as an enthusiast that we get some sort of quote unquote return to normalcy. I miss the pomp and circumstance. I had long joked with coworkers for years when I was in my corporate job about making it to Detroit and New York and LA and Chicago. And now I've covered Chicago twice. I've covered LA once and am making plans for going out to LA again for the auto show. And again, the series of circumstances made me miss Detroit this year. New York was kind of in the same boat, and last year New York was canceled like the week of. So we're still in a weird time for auto shows, but we're kind of seeing that ramp back up, and I'm very interested to see how this all plays out. But as always, I thank you for listening and for supporting. You have no idea what just listening to each and every episode does for us, us here at GT Garage Talk, for our channel. You can go see, you can go see everything that we are doing, links to everything that we publish at gtgaragetalk.com, links to everything, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, all that good stuff, gtgaragetalk.com. But until next time, gearheads, bye.